Do you like cold, hard cash? Because I know a way that you can get some more of it. And no, it isn't a pyramid scheme. All you have to do is move to a cheaper state, which I guess is technically just saving more money. But more money is still more money. Don't get your hopes up yet, though, because while the following states may be great for your wallet, they may also be not so great for anything else, since a lot of them actually made our top 10 worst states list. But to be fair, a few of the states are actually pretty nice places to live. Now, the criteria we used for this list was based solely on living expenses. You know, everything from the cost of housing to taxes, utilities, groceries, health insurance, all the essentials. So if you're looking for something more, like good wages and affordability, let's hit 5,000 likes and I'll do a video on the top 10 most affordable states that you'd actually want to live in. But whether you've lost your job and are looking for a cheaper place to live, or maybe just need to start over and get away from a pyramid scheme that made you buy $5,000 worth of crazy looking pants, these are the top 10 cheapest states to live in for 2020. And before you ask, no, I have never fallen victim to a pyramid scheme. Well, that I know of. Number 10. Wyoming. I bet you didn't even think about this one. Maybe you forgot it was a state altogether. But then again, how can we really be sure Wyoming even exists? I mean, do you know anyone who lives there? Oh wait, actually I do have a friend in Cheyenne. But yes, the smallest state by population is also one of the cheapest. While the median home value of $250,000 is slightly above the national average of $248,000, Wyoming makes up for it with insanely cheap electric bills and by being the most tax-friendly state in the nation. The effective property tax rate is just 0.61%, sales tax is just 4%, and there's actually no state income tax. And if you're not looking to buy a home, the median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment here is under $1,000. So as long as you don't try to live in Jackson Hole, things shouldn't be too expensive. Speaking of Jackson Hole though, this state is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. With views like this, in addition to the cheap cost of living, it's honestly really surprising to me that more people don't want to live here. In fact, the population actually decreases by around 5,000 residents each year. Why would anyone want to leave this enchanting land, you might wonder? Well, mainly because there just aren't many good jobs outside of oil and mining, and even those are on the decline. But with great schools, insanely low crime, and top-notch healthcare, if you work online, Wyoming's probably one of the best places to live on this list, especially if you have a thing for cowboys. Although the cowboy state does rank among the top 5 worst states for dating, so maybe not actually. Number 9. New Mexico. If you're an ice cube connoisseur with 17 freezers, or if you are an ice cube who leaves their air conditioner on year-round, New Mexico is definitely worth considering. I mean, it's got the cheapest electric bills in the nation at just $74 a month on average. And the Land of Enchantment also has a pretty reasonable median home value of just $206,000, in addition to groceries and gas prices being cheaper than most states. But there's a reason everything's so cheap here. New Mexico is one of the poorest and most dangerous states in America. The crime rate in the largest city, Albuquerque, is 192% above the national average, and the violent crime rate is 259% above the national average. Altogether, New Mexico is actually the second most dangerous state, but considering that nearly 20% of the population lives below the poverty line, it kinda makes sense. The median household income is just $47,000, and since the infrastructure and schools continue to be severely underfunded, it doesn't look like the situation's getting better anytime soon. New Mexico actually has the second worst education system and the lowest high school graduation rate of any state. But while you may not want to live here, I'd highly recommend at least taking a drive through the Rockies and across the Rio Grande, as this state is breathtakingly beautiful with so much rich Native American history. Although if you do, make sure you keep an eye on your car at all times, because New Mexico has the most vehicle thefts in the US. Number 8. Kansas. With a median home value of just $150,000, an average utility bill of just $92 a month, cheap groceries, and a gallon of gasoline costing just $1.74, Kansas is cheap. And there's a reason for that. it's Kansas. In all honesty, though, this is probably one of the most boring states. I mean, heck, even the landscape's flat. Sure, there's Wichita with decent small city amenities, and it's dirt cheap with a median home value of just $136,000 and a median rent under $800 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, but that's about all it has going for it. And while some of the suburbs of Kansas City, like Overland Park or Leawood, are actually amazing places to raise a family, they're also much more expensive, with median home prices in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. Now, Kansas isn't an awful place to live by any means, but there just isn't a whole lot going on either, and that's probably why no one moves here. Net migration into the state over the last 20 years has actually only been 20,700 people total. Heck, Dorothy even wanted to leave. Number 7. Alabama. Alabama was the #1 worst state on our top 10 worst states to live in list, but it's only the 7th cheapest state? Wait, then why would anyone move to Alabama if there's better places to live that are also cheaper? Well, for whatever reason, around 15,000 people a year still do, making Alabama the fastest growing state on our list so far. Albeit, it's not growing very fast with an annual growth rate of just 0.3%. But I'm honestly not sure why there's even a growth rate at all. Maybe the new residents are just huge University of Alabama football fans, or maybe they don't mind the alligators in the rivers, swamps, and beaches and just wanted to get a cheap oceanfront property in Gulf Shores. Because if you're looking for cheap property, you can definitely find it here. The median home value across the entire state is still just $140,000, and in Birmingham, it's only $65,000. But other than the inexpensive housing, groceries, and gas, and some beautiful forests and lakes, the negatives definitely outweigh the positives. The Yellowhammer State is dead last when it comes to education and quality of life, has one of the worst economies, awful healthcare coverage, and an extremely high poverty rate. But hey, at least there's good barbecue. Number 6. West Virginia. Before you move here, ask yourself, am I retired or do I work online? If you answered no to both, then don't move here because West Virginia is the poorest state and there are literally no jobs. Although if you answered yes to either of the questions and love nature, then the mountain state might be a great option since it's also the only state that lies completely within the Appalachian Mountain region. But keep in mind that while West Virginia is gorgeous, there are also a lot of creepy towns with a lot of creepy residents, so you might feel some weird vibes. Well, unless you're creepy too, in which case you'll fit right in. Heck, you could even move to this town named Odd. Those strange towns, along with the rundown cities that no one wants to live in, are probably why the median home value is the lowest in the country, though, at just $104,000. Honestly, if the gas prices, groceries, taxes, and health insurance costs weren't above the national average, West Virginia would have been #1 on this list. But that doesn't mean the mountain state's a good place to live. Aside from having the worst economy and infrastructure in the US, West Virginia also has one of the top 5 worst education systems, the highest depression and obesity rates, and is the 2nd worst state for healthcare quality. At least on the bright side, though, this is one of the cheapest places to get married, with the average wedding costing just a little over $18,000. Although considering West Virginia is also the worst state for dating, you probably won't find anyone to marry. Number 5. Missouri. Between Kansas City and St. Louis, Missouri has 2 of the 10 most dangerous cities in the country, and St. Louis is usually ranked among the top 3, which I guess is great if you're a bounty hunter, but terrible if you're literally anyone else. So it makes sense that housing costs are extremely low, with a median home value of just $162,000 and a median rent under $900 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. And the state's pretty cheap overall, with a gallon of gas costing just $1.71, and groceries and utility bills both being well below the national average. But besides for the high crime rates and horrible healthcare, Missouri actually isn't a terrible place to live. Now, don't get me wrong, the schools and job opportunities aren't great, but they also aren't awful either. Most things here are just average. Well, besides the stunning Ozarks, of course. And I guess the Chiefs now. And to be fair, St. Louis does have some amazing suburbs to raise a family in, but they're also much more expensive than the median home price. Number 4. Michigan. From one Midwestern M state to another. Wait, there are actually a few states on this list that start with the letter M. In fact, there's a lot of states in general that start with the letter M. Massachusetts, Minnesota. Yeah, I can count at least 8. Oh, was I rambling? Anyways, you probably all know by now that Detroit is one of the cheapest cities in America with a median home price of just $36,000. Yeah, you heard me right. You can buy a house here for the cost of your average car. But considering the horrible schools and infrastructure, lack of jobs, and a violent crime rate 425% above the national average, you probably won't want to. Although most of the other cities here, like Lansing or Grand Rapids, are very affordable too, with median home values of $98,000 and $183,000 respectively. And the statewide median home value is just $174,000. But while housing is cheap, the other essential living expenses are a bit higher than the other states on this list. Honestly, if the food and utilities were around the national average and the wealthy suburbs like Bloomfield Hills or Birmingham weren't so expensive, Michigan probably would have been number 1. I mean, heck, where else can you find a 3-bedroom lakefront property for only $100K? And speaking of lakes, Michigan's literally surrounded by 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, which means there's a lot of beautiful nature here, especially in the Upper Peninsula. Number 3. Arkansas. Did you know Arkansas has the lowest overall housing costs in the US? The average resident spends less than $750 a month on their rent or mortgage, and the median home value is just $128,000. But not only is housing cheap, gas, utilities, food, health insurance, childcare, and pretty much anything you can think of also costs much less than the national average. Well, except Tesla stock. That's expensive no matter where you live. And the wages here are also the second lowest of any state, with a median household income of just $47,000, so it sort of balances out. But if you're dead set on living in Arkansas and can afford it, I'd highly recommend moving to the slightly more expensive Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers area, where the median home costs around $200,000. Mainly because they're actually really nice cities to live in that still aren't too expensive, but also because everywhere else in the state is a complete mess. Well, besides the Ozarks. Those are magical. But the natural state still has awful schools, an insanely high poverty rate of 19%, and the 5th highest property and violent crime rates in the nation. And most of the cities are even worse. Little Rock has a violent crime rate 280% above the national average, and Pine Bluff's violent crime rate is 323% above the national average. Basically, if you want to move to a dirt cheap state that ends in Kansas, I'd recommend Kansas. And that's saying something. Number 2. Oklahoma. Along with Wyoming and Michigan, Oklahoma's honestly one of the better states to live in on this list. Sure, it's not the best state by any means, or even in the top 30 probably, but Oklahoma City and Tulsa are both dirt cheap cities and have a lot going for them. And by dirt cheap, I really do mean dirt cheap. The median home value in Tulsa is just $127,000, and in OKC, it's still under $140,000. Heck, even the super rich and fancy suburbs like Edmond and Broken Arrow are affordable. Not to mention, they're also some of the best places to raise a family. And unlike a lot of the other states on this list, the economy's actually fairly decent here, with the cities having median household incomes well above the living wage of $52,805. And the job markets in Tulsa and OKC are growing fast. If you're looking to invest in cheap real estate, they're great markets to take advantage of. Add in insanely cheap groceries, electricity, and gas, and Oklahoma is one of the most affordable states to live in. Now, before we get to number 1, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and let me know any ideas you have for future videos. And I also wanted to give a quick honorable mention to Tennessee, which has no state income tax, cheap gas and utilities, and below average housing. It's an all-around great place if you're looking for beautiful nature and good jobs. But it's also one of the most dangerous states, with a violent crime rate nearly double the national average. So keep that in mind. But without further ado, here's number 1. Number 1. Mississippi. There's a reason people say, thank God for Mississippi. Basically, it means that no matter how bad your state is, at least it isn't Mississippi. But this time, Mississippians are having the last laugh since they're saving way more money than anyone else. How does 50 grand for a house 2 blocks from the beach sound? Because you can find it in Gulfport. In fact, with a median home value of just $124,000, Mississippi has the lowest cost of living no matter where you live, from the lowest price per square foot to cheap rent to cheap electric bills to cheap groceries to the cheapest childcare to cheap everything. Well, except weddings, which are actually pretty pricey with an average cost of $28,000 to get hitched. But then again, if you're deciding to move to Mississippi, you better already be married because it's one of the worst states for dating. Regardless though, if you're just looking to save money and don't care about anything else, Mississippi's the cheapest state to live in for 2020.